I have been very adamant over the last year that Michael Chandler is ruining his career, wasting away, sitting on the sidelines, waiting for Conor McGregor to return for a supposed red panty night, money fight. And that is just simply a myth. Because when I criticize Michael Chandler and I say, look, Michael Chandler should be fighting, he should be being active, he shouldn't be waiting on Conor McGregor, people will say, well, it'll all be worth it if he waits it out and he gets the Conor McGregor fight because that's the money fight. One of the biggest myths in MMA is the red panty night, is the money fight against Conor McGregor. And I've discussed it a little bit in each one of my Michael Chandler videos, but I never made a dedicated video on it because this is one of the biggest myths in MMA. But recently have a former Conor McGregor opponent, Cowboy Cerrone, going on the record and saying, you know what? When I fought Conor McGregor, it wasn't a red panty night. I barely got paid for that. And Cowboy Cerrone is a Dana White sycophant. He's a UFC shill. He's going to testify in the antitrust lawsuit on behalf of the UFC. So it's not coming from a place of bitterness. It's not coming from a place of hate. It's coming from him just being honest about what actually happened when he fought Conor McGregor. And this is something that I've broken down and talked about on multiple different videos. But now we're going to take a look at this clip from Cowboy Cerrone on a podcast where he discusses it. Because I truly believe that Michael Chandler, every day that passes, it's more of a wasted career and it's a wasted opportunity because Michael Chandler's last fight was on November 12th, 2022. He's been out for roughly 15 months to the date I'm recording this. And it doesn't appear that Conor McGregor is going to return before fall of this year. But let's say it's summer of this year. So we're looking at potentially another 3 to 6 months for Conor McGregor to return. And then if he decides to fight Michael Chandler, you're looking at close to 2 years, a year and a half, really, that Michael Chandler's been sitting on the sidelines. And people keep saying it'll all be worth it. It'll all be worth it if he gets that money fight. I just simply don't think it is. And I really, truly believe that Michael Chandler could have been active over the last year and a half. And meanwhile, instead, he's been embarrassing himself. He's been debasing himself, just sucking up to Conor McGregor in hopes and praying that'll get this Conor McGregor fight, and it hasn't worked yet. And he's been doing it since he entered the UFC. He hasn't only been doing it for the last year. He's been doing it since he entered the UFC. I made a video when I first started my channel. It's titled something along the lines is, why won't Michael Chandler stop making flattering comments about Conor McGregor? Something along those lines. I made that when I first started the channel. It has like 50 views on the channel. That's how old it is. He's been looking for this fight for many years, and I think he's brainwashed by the myth that it's a money fight. And in the meantime, because of his delusion, I think he's starting to come around a little bit. In the last interview he did with the MMA Hour, which I broke down, it seems like he's starting to come around to it. But imagine this. Imagine a world where Michael Chandler was active, okay? So he's been out for roughly 15 months, which is a little over a year. He could have fought 4 times, 5 times. Let's just be generous and say, okay, he's got injuries, he has crazy fights. He could at least fought 3 times. A year and a half, he could have fought 3 times. So that would have been 3 paychecks. And what's even crazier about that is he would have still had the opportunity to fight Conor McGregor. Let's say all 3 times he got brutally chinned. Well, Conor McGregor would be rubbing his hands together like that meme of that guy in the yellow suit behind the tree. He'd be like, oh, I'll definitely take the Chandler fight now. But instead, Conor has just kind of played with Chandler's emotions, and then Chandler's been groveling to him and basically begging for the fight on the sidelines. And even Michael Chandler is leaving his family for mythical training camps. We've looked at that clip time and time again. We'll look at it again in this video just for the hell of it. But so let me get this straight. Chandler could have been active collecting paychecks, at bare minimum 3 paychecks, but let's say he sits out until November of this year. Let's say he does finally get the Conor McGregor fight that he's been itching to get. There's only one dude on his mind. Let's say he finally gets the fight. Let's say it happens November. Let's say it happens October. He sat out for 2 years. That's 24 months. He could have fought 6 times. He could have got 6 more paychecks, and he still could have fought Conor McGregor. And you know what's even crazier? If he won one big fight, people would have been clamoring for him to fight Islam Makhachev. I know the lightweight division's stacked, but there's no real clear-cut number 1 contender right now. There's really no clear-cut, undisputable, or indisputable number 1 contender for the lightweight division. And guess who's a very interesting matchup for Islam Makhachev? It would have been Michael Chandler, super explosive and powerful, has decent BJJ defense, has good wrestling, strong, like kind of low center of gravity, has the ability to stuff takedowns. And I think he would have won one big fight. whether against, Benoit Saint-Denis or Justin Gaethje or Dustin Poirier. I know those would have been rematches. One big fight, and Chandler would have been right in discussion. It could have been against Jalen Turner for all it matters. People would have said, oh, Chandler can be the guy to chin Islam. And it would have been a compelling fight. So not only has Chandler wasted his time where he could have collected, bare minimum 3 paychecks, but if he doesn't fight till this winter, 6 paychecks, he could have also got a title fight. And that's inevitably his dream. But instead, he's embarrassing himself. He's leaving his family, all in hopes that this is going to be some massive windfall payday. And that's just simply not true. And on top of that, he's leaving his family. Let's take a look at this clip to start off. Let's take a look at this clip to start it off, just for the hell of it. This is the beginning of January, where he did an interview with Brett Okamoto on ESPN, and he talks about, I'm leaving my family shortly. I mean, this is literally beginning of January. Still doesn't have a fight date yet.
My team has been in touch with the UFC, and June 29th is what I'm preparing for. I'm leaving my family here in the next couple weeks to head down to Florida to get into fight camp, the fight camp that has been looming now for a year. June 29th. So
there you go. He's leaving his family in a couple weeks to fight Conor McGregor, to get in shape for a training camp against Conor McGregor at 185 or maybe 205, or who really knows, because we still don't have a date. Dana White has gone on record saying, oh, we're hopeful that Conor McGregor fights this year. So there's still a very good chance that Chandler sits out another 6 months, and then finally the UFC tells him, you know what, it doesn't look like he's coming back, or we're going to go in a different direction, and time to move on, Chandler. The UFC's finally going to tell him time to move on, and it's going to be heartbreaking for him. And honestly, I don't say this. People think I hate Michael Chandler, or I want to disrespect Michael Chandler. I've been following Michael Chandler's career since he was in Bellator. I've been a fan of Michael Chandler for over 10 years. I watched those wars against Eddie Alvarez. I watched those fights against Will Brooks. I watched his entire Bellator career almost. I'm pretty sure I've seen every fight. And it just sucks to be a fan who loves watching Michael Chandler fight and seeing him sit on the sidelines for a fight that not only may never happen, but even if it does happen, it's not going to be the massive payday that he thinks it is. Now let's move on to a Cowboy Cerrone podcast. He went on this podcast with this guy named Dale Brisby. I guess he's a bull rider or whatever. And I'm going to link both or the entire podcast down in the description if you want to check it out. But I want to start off with a couple clips of Cowboy Cerrone basically being a Dana White sycophant, a UFC sycophant, a UFC shill. I want to show you context that Cowboy Cerrone loves the UFC. Cowboy Cerrone has no ill will towards the UFC. Cowboy Cerrone is going to be a witness for the UFC's antitrust lawsuit in favor of the UFC. I want to show you some context. Here's him defending the UFC's pay structure of fighters getting 12 and 12. And the reason I'm showing you this is because when I show you the later clip of him talking about his Conor McGregor payday, it's not coming from a place of hate. So let's check it out.
He is. People like to talk badly about him and how he doesn't pay his fighters enough. And
he's talking about Dana White, by the way, in case you don't know.
Number one, the UFC is a machine. If you're not part of the machine and you're not doing your job in the machine, you get spit out. And I get that. If you're part of the machine and you're oiling it and keeping it greased and you're rolling with the machine,
I'll tell you one thing. Michael Chandler's keeping Conor McGregor oiled and greased.
You're taken care of.
Yeah.
So all these guys that are coming in, they're like, they're only starting me at 12 and 12. And I want to remind them that $24,000 is a lot of money.
Right.
Let me tell you what Cowboy Cerrone sounds like right now. Cowboy Cerrone sounds like one of those 70, 80-year-olds that's like, yeah, these kids aren't what they used to be, and they should be able to buy a house and have 8 cars and have 6 children and only one parent work. And it's not that anymore. First off, to advocate for 12 and 12 and say 24,000 is a lot of money is crazy. It's crazy because first off, you may lose. So then you only get 12,000. People say, oh, well, 12,000 for one night of work isn't bad at all. Oh, well, that's true, but it's not one night of work. There's full training camps that are 8 weeks long. You got to pay your bills. Then you got taxes coming out of that. And then you got to pay your coaches and your gym dues. So to defend 12 and 12 is just crazy, but that's how much of a sycophant Donald Cowboy Cerrone is for the UFC. And he's saying, if you work along with the machine and you oil it and you use it or whatever the hell he said, he's saying basically, if you don't ever have any negotiations with the UFC, you take whatever the UFC offers you, you fight injured, you fight as often as possible, you might be able to make some money in the long run. That's essentially what he's saying. Now, this next clip is a little bit more of kind of that, where he's just kind of defending the UFC. And again, I'm just showing you this for context of Cowboy Cerrone's feelings about the UFC. And this is him talking about like some of the new fighters coming in and just saying, kids these days and kind of, oh, these young whippersnappers.
Here's no money, have a ride. We'll get you a bus ride home.
Yeah.
So talking to these kids about, for one, they think that just because they somehow made it to the UFC that they deserve fame and fortune. And I'd like to remind these kids again, you're in it for the wrong reasons if that's what you're chasing, young buck.
But that's true, but it shouldn't be that way. You have a multi-billion-dollar company. There's no reason you should be fighting in the UFC and have to have another job to support yourself. That's supposed to be the premier fighting organization. So for Cowboy Cerrone just to advocate against, people in his position or formerly his position is just crazy to me. But we'll listen a little bit more here.
If fame and fortune is all you're looking for, then this isn't, maybe you should be a rapper.
So basically he's saying, you're not going to get paid, but you got to love fighting. You got to show up and you just love fighting. So the point is, he loves the UFC. He loves Dana White. He has no ill will towards the UFC and Dana White. Now let's look at another clip where he discusses his payday against Conor McGregor, the money fight, the red panty night that he so-called got back at UFC 246 in January of 2020, which is over 4 years ago, which is crazy. I don't know how time went by that fast. But let's listen to what he has to say about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone thinks I got super paid on that. Did not.
Right.
Yeah, you're contracted. You have a contract.
This is what I've been saying forever. He says, everyone thinks I got super paid, but you got a contract. I've broke it down so many times, but the MMA media keeps regurgitating it, and the MMA fans regurgitate it as if it's true. Just because you fight Conor McGregor does not mean you get some massive payday. I'm going to break down why here in a second, but let's get through this Cowboy Cerrone clip.
That's what it is, right? You're contracted to feed someone's bowl, and you have a deal like whatever. Like JB was telling me, he gets X amount of dollars every day to feed someone's bowl, take care of them, teach them to buck. Well, if Twisted Steel comes in there, he still gets that same amount of money.
Yeah.
He doesn't be like, ooh, that's Dana White's bowl? Nah, 8 times the price.
So there's a little bit more to this. But what Cowboy Cerrone is saying is something that I've known for a long time and I've tried to convey to you guys in these different videos. You sign a contract with the UFC. The UFC likes to sign fighters to long-term deals because they can cut you at any time. They're not required to fulfill that contract. So they lock you up for a long-term deal. If you underperform, they cut you. But then if you grow and you build your star power, they continue to pay you under that same contract. So therefore, they're profiting more over you versus you've kind of built this star power. And that's why there's a lot of kind of negotiating disputes between fighters and the UFC. But basically what he's saying is, look, I signed my contract, and he gets into it a little bit more about it's an 8-fight deal. I signed my contract. No matter who I'm fighting, I'm getting paid my contract. And one of those fights was Conor McGregor. But we'll listen to more.
I'm just saying, like, let's say him and Dana had a contract.
Yeah.
He makes $25 a day to take care of these bulls and buck them. Just because a superstar, just because Bodacious shows up, he can't be like, that's $50 a day.
Right.
Well, same thing in the contract. You're contracted for X amount of fights. I would always sign, which is unheard of, 8-fight deals. Most people do 1, 2, 3, but I knew I wanted to fight 8 times a year. So an 8-fight deal for me was a year or half a year. You know what I mean?
So whether you're fighting, Nate Diaz, whether you're fighting Edson Barboza, whether you're fighting Benson Henderson, or whether you're fighting Conor McGregor, you're getting paid what's on your contract. And we're going to talk about pay-per-view points and everything here in a second. We're going to break down Conor's opponents, and I'm going to explain to you what happened in each particular situation here in a second.
So I'd always do 8-fight deals. I'm locked into that. It's not like 3 fights in, I can be like, time to renegotiate.
Yeah, because I'm fighting Conor.
Yeah, because I'm fighting Conor. No. You still have 4 more fights on your contract. This is what you're getting paid. So everyone's like, red panty night, you got paid. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I paid what I always got paid, which is good.
Yeah.
I ain't complaining. Not making shit up saying, Dana, he owes me money. No, I made great money.
By the way, he got paid $200,000 to fight Conor McGregor, which sold 1,300,000 pay-per-views, so 1.3 million pay-per-view sales. He got paid $200,000.
Yeah.
So,
but you had that. So you agreed to the 8-fight deal, and then they call you along the way,
just like
and
anything,
it's anytime, anywhere. So when they called you about Conor, you're like, Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, let's go.
That's so
course.
badass.
Right?
That's so badass, getting taken advantage of by a multi-billion-dollar company. Hand me my pack of Marlboros, let me eat them like chips.
Of course. I didn't call like, ooh, I'll only fight Conor if.
Right.
No. Let's go.
That's so badass.
Let's do it. You know? So in my career, I made $10 million.
That's a super active career, by the way, filled with bonuses as well. I believe Cowboy Cerrone, for the amount of damage he took, that's being underpaid like crazy, to be quite honest.
I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, I don't live crazy. I don't.
And by the way, I'm going to let it play a little bit longer. I wasn't going to, but I believe the guy calls him out. Well, you're so rich, then what about this?
Don't buy crazy. I mean, this new truck.
You are a penny pinching son of a bitch. You act like you got no money.
Yeah, that's how I have money. Right?
Fool. The last 2 tanks of gas that you had to fill up with when I was with you, I paid for. Dale, I'm giving you a ride.
So there you go. Cowboy Cerrone is having other people pay for his gas. Now let's take a look at UFC 246 disclosed salaries. You see Conor McGregor's $3 million with no win bonus. Donald Cowboy Cerrone $200,000 for a pay-per-view that sold 1.3 million pay-per-view sales. That is craziness. That's $80 million, I think, roughly $85 million. Then you have the gate, which is probably another 15 to 20 million. So you have a pay-per-view that generates $100 million, maybe more. You're getting paid $200,000 in the main event. And I understand people are going to say, well, Cowboy Cerrone isn't the big draw. I understand that. But Cowboy Cerrone been around forever. He's in the UFC's good graces. And all he's getting is $200,000 for his fight against Conor McGregor. That is the point. Now, I want to look at Conor McGregor's career real quick. Because there's going to be some people that say, oh, well, so-and-so got a red panty night and so-and-so got a red panty night. There is ways that you can get a red panty night from the UFC, a.k.a. a big money fight from the UFC. And there's many fighters that have gotten it against Conor McGregor because you look over the course of his career, right? You see the Jose Aldo fight here. Conor McGregor was kind of transcending into becoming a star right about here. And so Jose Aldo got paid pay-per-view points because he was the champion. So Jose Aldo there, while it's not like the craziest payday ever, he got a pretty good payday for this fight at UFC 194. Then you have Nate Diaz. This loss against Nate Diaz at UFC 196. Nate Diaz got paid a lot of money for this fight. You know why? Because Nate Diaz took that fight on short notice, so he negotiated on like a week's notice. The UFC desperately needed somebody to step in. Nate Diaz accepted the fight, but he negotiated a new contract for the fight, and then also he won the fight. So Nate Diaz won this fight and built his entire name. I mean, Nate Diaz already had a decent fan base, but the stardom that he has today was because of the fact he took that short notice fight and went out there and choked out Conor McGregor. And then on top of that, Conor McGregor wanted a rematch. So in this rematch, Nate Diaz got paid big money. It was a massive money fight, UFC 202, because Nate Diaz had the UFC by the balls. He said, look, if you want to give Conor the rematch, I need to get paid for it. Conor wants that win back. You want that fight. It's a massive fight for Conor to get that win back. You got to pay me big money. So then again, Nate Diaz got paid big money for this second fight. Then the fight after that, Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez is a champion. He gets pay-per-view points. If you don't understand what pay-per-view points are, it's, you know, I'm just going to make up numbers here, but essentially in your contract, if you're a champion or you're a pay-per-view star, it'll say for every pay-per-view sale above 300,000, you'll get $1 per sale. That's essentially the way pay-per-view points work. And then it'll be escalations. Every pay-per-view sale over 700,000, it'll be $250 per pay-per-view, something along those lines. Then you have Khabib Nurmagomedov. Similar situation. Khabib is champion. This is a mega fight. Khabib's getting pay-per-view points. This is the biggest pay-per-view of all time, UFC 229. So of course he's going to get a big payday there. And then you have Donald Cowboy Cerrone. This is just a filler fight. This is just to get Conor McGregor back in the cage. He goes out there, destroys Donald Cerrone. Donald Cerrone's only in there for 40 seconds, so he made $200,000 for 40 seconds. But at the end of the day, this could have been a broomstick. This didn't matter who it was. This was just Conor's return. So Cowboy had no negotiating leverage. And even though he's in favor with the UFC, they just paid him $200,000 plus probably a discretionary bonus that we don't know about, to be fair. But either way, it's not the point I'm trying to make here. It's not this life-changing money. Then Dustin Poirier, similar thing at UFC 257. I doubt Dustin Poirier got any pay-per-view points for this. I doubt that he got some massive windfall payday. He didn't get some red panty night here. It just doesn't happen. Maybe in the trilogy fight, here at UFC 264 where Conor broke his leg, Conor wanted that rematch in the trilogy. Dustin Poirier had some leverage there. He probably negotiated escalations, and he also probably negotiated pay-per-view points. Obviously, since then, Dustin Poirier has had some big fights. He has a big fight coming up at UFC 299. But the point I'm making is if you don't have any negotiating leverage, if you could be replaced with any opponent and it wouldn't really matter, you don't have negotiating power. And Michael Chandler doesn't have any negotiating power. He's already tipped his hand to the UFC. He's already shown how desperately he wants this fight. Michael Chandler will not get pay-per-view points for the Conor McGregor fight. He's not going to get pay-per-view points. All he's going to get is his flat rate, whatever's in his contract. Now, where these money fights turn into even bigger money fights, where you have Khabib Nurmagomedov or Eddie Alvarez or Nate Diaz, where it can really turn into a money fight is parlaying it with stardom afterwards. And Nate Diaz did that. Nate Diaz was able to parlay that win into kind of superstardom afterwards. So that's how Michael Chandler can turn his career around. If he gets the Conor McGregor fight and he goes out there and gets a crazy first round KO and then parlays that into the notoriety and the star power that comes with beating Conor McGregor, then he kind of saves his career. But at the same time, I don't know if that'll happen, even if he does get the fight, which is unlikely. And then even if he does go out there and starch him in like a viral KO moment, I don't believe that Michael Chandler is going to get kind of the push that someone like Nate Diaz did, or someone even like Dustin Poirier did back in 2021. It's crazy how many years it's been since that fight happened. 3 years ago since Dustin Poirier TKO'd Conor McGregor. I don't think Chandler's going to get that push because most people are going to say, well, Conor, he's been out. He's got one win since 2016. That's the craziest thing. One win since 2016 for Conor McGregor, coming off a catastrophic leg break. I don't think Chandler's going to get that push. But what Chandler's hoping for is he knows he's getting paid his flat contract. Now, maybe the UFC is going to give him a little bit extra because he's waited out all this time and they feel bad for him. And he was on The Ultimate Fighter. He definitely got paid to be on The Ultimate Fighter. Maybe he gets paid a little bit more. But Chandler's banking on the notoriety, the star power, and the push that comes with a win over Michael Chandler or win over Conor McGregor. What I can compare it to, and I don't know all the details, but basically you read about people who perform at the Super Bowl halftime show don't really get paid. If anything, they lose money. But they're willing to do it because they get the exposure and then they make money kind of on the back end with record sales and downloads and different things and include it notoriety of being watched by hundreds of millions of people simultaneously. So big name performers will perform at the Super Bowl halftime show for back end money. That's essentially what Chandler's hoping for, but I don't think he even gets that. There's a chance he can get that. But I don't even think he gets that because if he beats Conor, everyone's going to be like, well, Conor McGregor's an alcoholic. Conor McGregor's a cokehead. Conor McGregor suffered a catastrophic injury and took 3 years off before he came back and Chandler KO'd him. It's not really going to mean as much. I think Conor's lost a bit of his aurora considering he's won one fight since November of 2016. Who would have thought the night that he beat Eddie Alvarez, put on that masterclass, he would win one fight in the next 8 years, and it's against a Cowboy Cerrone who's on the way out. So unless Chandler gets the viral KO, gets the star power afterwards, parlays it into a title shot, plus there's going to be more sponsors that want to do deals with him because he got this kind of explosion of popularity with whenever Conor McGregor, he's ruined his career. What Michael Chandler needs to do right now, and Chandler, if you see this video, Chandler's brother, if you see this video, I would love to have you on the channel and talk about it. Supposedly, Chandler's brother's watching the videos. He's commenting on the videos recently. But what he needs to do is he needs to tell the UFC, pull Max Holloway out of the BMF title fight at UFC 300. If I'm not going to fight Conor, I've been strung along for this long. You guys owe me this favor. Pull Max Holloway out. Put me in against Justin Gaethje for the BMF title. I know we fought before. Put me in that fight. The fans would love that fight for the BMF title. Put Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria in Spain, and then win or lose against Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler can still fight Conor McGregor. Michael Chandler's already left his family. He's in training camp. He can be ready for UFC 300. He's been talking about it for months. That is the way Chandler can save his career. Get that BMF title fight at UFC 300 against Justin Gaethje on one of the biggest cards. You get KO'd, you can still fight Conor McGregor whenever he returns. If you win, now you're the BMF champion. You can lure Conor out potentially with that. But still, I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think Chandler's ever going to get the fight. I don't think he's getting a red panty night, even if he does get the fight. The only way he's getting a red panty night associated with Conor McGregor is if Conor McGregor buys him a red thong and brings him on his yacht to hang out with him. That's the only way it's happening. So Chandler's got one dude on his mind. He needs to get him out of his mind. He needs to go see a therapist. He needs to get away from that. He needs to start making moves to save his career. He's going to be 38 in April. I hate to see it. He's one of the most exciting fighters on the entire UFC roster. He's wasting his career for a mythical money fight. I've broke it down so many times. Even if he fights Conor, he's not going to get this crazy multi-million-dollar payday that a lot of people think he's going to get. I doubt he even gets paid $1 million to fight Conor McGregor. So I wanted to break that down because that's a massive myth in the media. Now we have Donald Cowboy Cerrone even confirming it himself, who's a UFC sycophant, a Dana White sycophant. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.